Hello, welcome to Text Adventure Time. Just going to check that I can be heard on the stream. Awesome. So yes, this is basically a little stream to share how to use Twine, how to make text adventures with it. My kind of at the top disclaimer is that I'm a professional coder in as much as I have been paid to make text adventure games. However, I am self-taught. But my hope is that ideally, basically, what this will be is taking a lot of stuff that otherwise people would have to search the internet for, do trial and error on, try to figure out for themselves, and just put it kind of into one place. So basically, a lot of the time I will be able to share how to do things and how to figure out workarounds, things like that. But I don't have the kind of trained mind that will tell you exactly why things work the way they do. But I have a few years of experience working with Twine, a very specific element of Twine, but we'll get to that in a sec. And I've spent the vast majority of the last kind of 3-4 months doing a huge amount of coding in Twine and figuring out how to do different things and finding out all the typical ways to troubleshoot or common things that come up. So I figured that it might be good to try and, like I say, put all of this in one place. All of these videos are going to go on YouTube afterwards as well, so that if you miss anything, you can obviously come back to them. And because this is the first one, it is going to be very much the basics. So if you're kind of already a little bit familiar with Twine and you're looking for stuff like how do I do timed reveals of text, or how do I do kind of clever things with text entry and things like that, then you'll probably want to come back a couple of sessions into this. It's at this point that I realise I might get a better connection if I actually plug my laptop in. But yes, so today is all about the absolute essentials. Let's just get that done, shall we? You can tell that I'm really awake and I'm not drastically overworked or anything like that. So yes, to start with, something to say is that you can get Twine from twinery.org. I'll just put that into chat as well. Why is it auto-correcting to winery.org? No, twinery.org, and you can get it for Mac, you can get it for Windows, desktops and laptops, so you're probably covered whatever system you are on. You'll notice if you are downloading Twine, I would recommend downloading. There is an online version that you can use, but what that means is that you're really dependent on your internet connection and saving stuff. If you kind of want to make sure you've always got backups and things like that, it's best for you to download it. If you're worried about the amount of space on your computer, trust me, because what you're saving with Twine is HTML files, they are vanishingly small compared to if you've got any music files, any video files, anything like that. So don't worry about it taking up any kind of space. If you do download Twine now, you'll probably see something that looks a little bit different to this little thing I've got here. That's because I've got version 2.3.9. I think it's up to about, if you download it now, you'll get something like version 2.3.13. The next few streams of this are going to be with me on this version, because I am in the middle of quite a large project that is using this version, and I don't want to change the version that I'm running on my computer whilst I'm doing that project, partially because I've noticed some other people on that project using a newer version, and it's got some bits and pieces in terms of testing and debugging that I'm not yet familiar with. That shouldn't change too much of these first few sessions, because these first sessions are all just how do you do different types of links, how do you format text, etc., which will be the same throughout. But just if you're thinking it looks a bit different, that's why we're still going to be fine. The fundamentals are the same. And in a few sessions, I'm hoping to update my Twine once that project's wrapped up, and then I'll have exactly what you'll be looking at. So this is basically, if you open up Twine, this is what you're going to see. As my little kind of title says, very top of this, we're just going to do navigating Twine. You can see I've got a couple of stories. These are some very old ones. But what we're going to do is just go to story at the side. Like it says, you can change this later. I'm just going to, for the moment, for this stream, going to make a having a friend over for a cup of tea generator, because that just seems like a straightforward, clear thing to do. So I'm just going to name this cup of tea generator and press add. And it takes me through to this. So yes, this is like something you will get very familiar with, this little grid setup. In terms of bits and pieces, you've got these three at the bottom. I'm just going to double check. Yeah, you can see all of this on the screen. Great. You've got these at the bottom, and this is just obviously if you're working with a huge number of these little squares, which are called passages. If you end up having a lot of them, you might want to zoom out so that you can see where all of them are. Normally, if I'm zoomed out, this is the furthest I go, just because you still get the title, so you can see what the different passages are a bit more easily. Then you've got buttons over here that are quite important, obviously, like passage, and it will just generate one called Untitled Passage, and then number. Few other things to cover. You'll notice these passages look a little bit different because one of them has a green kind of, it's meant to be a rocket ship, I'm pretty sure. What that just means is that this is where the game starts. If you ever press play at the bottom, or if you ever press test, that is where it's going to start. But you can change that whenever you want. The way you would change that is whenever you hover over a passage, you'll see these come up. Obviously this is ditch the passage, delete it, trash it. This will be if you want to make an edit to the passage. This is if you want to test what you've got, but you want to start at that point. So obviously if you press play down in this corner, you're going to start wherever there is the rocket. If you press play when you're holding it over this, you'll start at that passage, which depending on what you're making, there'll be times where you just want to see if a certain passage is working, or you don't want to go through all of these bits of a game, so you'll start later on. And then if you click these three little things, to be honest, I've never really used small, wide, tall and large. Everything has worked fine for me without having to fiddle with those. But if I was to press start story here, you can see the little green rocket has hopped over to this passage. And so that's how you do that. Now, there's a few things here that I'm just going to go into kind of quickly. Again, if I'm going ridiculously fast, then absolutely say, and if you've got any questions, throw them into the chat. Obviously, if you ask a question like, you know, how can I get players to enter code into the game that's recognized as game code and further influences the game, that's a later session, because that involves text entry and various different little tips and tricks. But if you have any questions, just throw them in chat. And if you want me to go over something a second time, absolutely let me know. Alternatively, obviously, like I said, this will all be on YouTube, so you can just go back over things. But here we have, obviously we can see the title, and if we click on this, we get a few different options here. One of the things that I'm going to say right now is about story format. Story format mainly is about the type of coding language that you're using when you are making the game. Harlow is the default, and Harlow is what I use. I am not familiar with Chatbook, I'm not familiar with Snowman, I'm not familiar with Sugar Cube. So basically, double check it's on Harlow. There's no reason that if you've just downloaded Twine, or if you're just making a new game with Twine, that it would be anything other than Harlow. But that's an important thing, because if you are ever online and you are ever searching for help, you're like, how do I do this thing on Twine? You'll want to put, how do I do this thing on Harlow on Twine? Because the answers for how to do the same thing or similar things on Sugar Cube versus Harlow will be very different, for example. But I swear, other than that, I know it's a bit jargony, but there's nothing else to be scared of there. Harlow is for me the most simple and accessible. I know that some people have preferences for other ones for different reasons. What I've heard is some people find Sugar Cube better for embedding media and sound and such like. You can still put sound into a game, whether it's like looping sound in the background or triggered sound if you're using Harlow. That again is going to be a few sessions down the line. But yeah, so that's what we mean by story format. That's what we mean by Harlow. There's a few other bits here that we will probably get to at a later point. But basically, things like your story's JavaScript is often, like when I'm putting sound into Harlow, there's big chunks of code I pull from the internet, I put in there to help sound work. And edit story style sheet is like if you want to change, you know, the background color for your entire game, or if you want to change the font style for your entire game, then you put it in the style sheet because that will affect all passages rather than if you want to do little bits and pieces. But those are things that you won't need to actually fiddle with right at the top if you just want to get going and start doing bits and pieces. Then of course we've got kind of renaming story, selecting passages, all those kind of things. Proofing copy is basically when you get like a plain text version of the game. And to be honest, I've only really ever used a proofing copy when I'm like making a game that is like 500 pages of A4 long in terms of code, and where I need to check that certain spellings are right, or if I need to search for very specific things, and that's like the best way for me to look through some stuff. So that is basically, oh, there's also at the bottom there is publish to file. That is for when you've got a version of your game that you're happy to share, and I'll share with you on the different ways that you can share your games online. There's a few via GetForge, via Itch, that kind of thing. Some websites will let you just plonk a load of HTML straight in there and you can just embed the game like that. But that's what you'll use with publish to file. So that, I would say, the only other kind of thing is this at the bottom, obviously, which is just find and replace, which is your standard find and replace. It's nice and useful, it's nice and simple. Again, it's something that I only personally use when I'm doing a really big project. And if I'm doing something smaller, I don't tend to use it as much, but it can be really handy, especially if you're into using a lot of things that you need to track during the game and you need to make sure, in that case, that all the spellings are the same or the capitalization is the same, that kind of thing. So that is navigating just like the basic interface of Twine, as it were. And the next thing that we're going to get into is passages and links. So these squares, as I've mentioned, are called passages. Hi to anyone who's just joining. This is a very kind of introductory session and you haven't missed much at the top. Basically just went over what the different buttons on this window do. But this is all going to be on YouTube afterwards if there's anything you want to catch up on. But we're just about to get into the actual like meat and potatoes of it. So these are called passages. A passage is just a place that you put your text in that stands on its own. And so, yeah, if you just go over it and click the pencil icon, I guess, just realized that I did it so quickly because it's kind of second nature. Then you've got the passage title up here, which you can make whatever you want. I'm just going to put it as, for the moment, I'm just going to put it as start of game. You might notice there's a little thing here called tag. That's something we will get into in a few sessions. It's something that if you're kind of doing stuff with headers and with footers or some more fiddly kind of bits and pieces, you'll need to use tags, but they're not something you have to worry about at the top at all. And yeah, click this passage to edit it. So if we're going to make something that is just, hi friend, come over for some tea generator, because what are games for if not utter fantasy of things you cannot access in your real life, then I'm gonna just start with you hear a knock on the door, and I'm gonna do this, answer it. So the absolute core of Twine is you have your passages and you have your links, and the simplest way to make a link from one passage to another is to put 2 square brackets around a piece of text, because what that does, if I now click just outside of that, you can see it's created a new passage, and we've got the little arrow that goes between them that shows you there is a link there, or shows you there is a link of that form there. We're going to get into slightly different types of links later in this little stream, but if you've got kind of a double bracket link, you will see that. Also, if I was to bin this, then you'll see that this has a little thing, but instead of being an arrow, it ends in a cross because it's broken. It has nowhere to go. So if you ever see that, it's because the game is going, there is nowhere for this to go. But we'll make a new passage. We'll call it Answer It, which was the title. So we've got that there. Something to just show that if I went to this passage and if I tried to also call this passage Answer It, it would say I couldn't do that, because obviously the game then wouldn't know which one to go to because it has 2 options and we can't give it those. However, if I was to do anything different, like just having a lowercase a rather than uppercase a, it would allow that. One of the things to remember with making kind of any digital game, but games in Twine, is, as much as it sometimes sucks, capitalization really matters. I'm just going to leave this untitled and blank over here for now. So that is the absolute core. I'll just show you what this looks like. If I just switch over to I'm just going to take that away. And so that's what this currently comes up as. What it does is when you press play or press test, it will open it up in a web browser. From my experience, if you're not connected to the internet, it will still open it up in a web browser. It will still work. From my time, like coding on buses, going between jobs. But this is what it will automatically look like. It will have a black background, white text, and anything that's clickable will be in blue. So you can see that we had Answer It with 2 brackets around. And if we click that, it takes us here, which obviously says double click this passage to edit it, because we've done nothing to that. You might also just be able to see, if I kind of highlight there, this is the undo button that is also like a default in Twine. So if I did that, I'd be able to hop back to the previous page. Some games that might make sense to have that button there. Other games it might not. There are updates, there's bits of code you can put in to wipe that from your game if you don't want players to have that option. For instance, the thing that I've most recently been working on, it's kind of the entire point is you're getting like lost deeper and deeper in a house, and you have to solve puzzles to get out of places, that kind of thing. And a lot of that would be like muted or spoiled a bit if people could actually go places and then get out just by hoofing themselves backwards rather than solving a puzzle, for instance. And you see that it also becomes a redo one, so it can just track where I've been. So that's how it will appear. I know that there's like this little bit in the corner which says variables, errors, source, debug view. If you are using Twine 2.3.13, the most recent version, you'll probably be seeing something a little bit different. You might see something that mentions enchantments. We are at such a basic level at this stream, don't need to worry about that yet at all. It's just something that becomes handy when you're dealing with stuff that's a little bit more complex and you want to see exactly what the game is tracking and it helps you make sense of all that. So back to Twine itself. That is basically the absolute essence, and I'm sure plenty of you can see how you could just easily make a game purely doing this. Like, you go to answer it. I mean, what we could do is then actually, if we've clicked answer it, we go, yes, answer the door. And we go, no, leave them outside, if our friend has come to have some tea. And so if you do it like this, it will automatically make those two options. And then, you know, yes, answer the door means you answer the door. Your friend is there. Your friend is there. Whereas if you go, no, leave them outside, you stay inside and do nothing. So you start to see how you can have branching things and such like. Now, this is obviously fairly basic. We might want to do stuff that feels a bit more flashy, or we might want to pay more attention to what choices people have made or that kind of thing. What I'm going to do next is just go over the different ways you can link between passages, because it's not just the brackets. This is going to get a little bit more into, it's going to get into stuff that is going to potentially feel a bit intimidating if you've never coded before. I promise it is basically just a lot of the way that I learned how to code things on Twine was by just copy and pasting and then changing the bits that I wanted to change for like what I was doing. I had no prior experience of anything like that. I mean, if you've got, I'll say this, if you've got like a kind of brain that works well with logic, you'll find it a bit easier, because a lot of this stuff is like, if this is true, take this person there. If this is false, take this person there, and just more complex forms of that. However, if you don't know logic, that's absolutely fine. If that's not your brain, it just might take a little bit more time to get used to it, but you absolutely can. So let's say I'm now just like, why am I making a cup of tea generator? Right. I'm gonna get to the point where we're making the cup of tea. So I'm gonna call one of these passages like making the tea. And so this isn't necessarily going to make sense in the context of the game that we're doing, as it were, but this is just to show some of the different ways you can do passages. Links between passages. So I'm just going to do some options. So we've got leave the bag in, and that's with the standard double brackets. Then you can also, that's me just, I normally code on a keyboard on a different laptop, which has a keyboard with a different setup. So sometimes I might accidentally, you might see me just go through a couple of symbols before I get to the one that I want. So leave the bag in, add milk. Right, I'm going to explain this in just a second. So this is another way of doing a link between two passages. So basically you have link, which is the clickable thing that will be visible to the player. You have to put that within some quotation marks. And one of the biggest things I've learned, and I don't know why it's true, but one of the biggest things I'd say is when you get to the point in coding where you're using a lot of quotation marks, if you copy quotation marks across from other programs, like if you're writing something up in Pages or Word doc or something like that because you find it easier to write it in there, and then you copy it over to Twine, it might not copy how you think. What Twine likes is straight like speech / quotation marks. If it ever sees ones that are curvy, it will not like that. So if you are ever having problems with Twine, that is probably one of the top troubleshoots I would say, is make sure if you have any quotation marks in your code that they are straight ones. And you'll just have to look through, basically. It's one of those things, but it's something that really screwed me over early on, so I wanted to flag it early on. But yeah, so add milk is what the player is going to see. And then you have to put some square brackets in. I can't remember the formal, there is formal language for this, and I will try to be more up on my formal language. But basically, if you have something in brackets like this, then you need to attach it to something in square brackets like this. Otherwise, you'll get an error message saying like, this isn't attached to anything. So inside the square brackets, you then have more curved brackets for the instruction, like what should happen when someone clicks the link that says add milk. And here I've put add milk. That would just be going to another passage. I'm just for the sake of like it being really clear that these are different, what the link says, add milk question mark, doesn't have to bear any relationship to what the goto says. That's one of the reasons why it can be useful, is because it doesn't have to say the same thing. You're not bound to what the name of the passage is. Goto is just an instruction, this goto right here. It just means that if someone clicks the link add milk, they're immediately going to go to the passage that you have called add milk, milk, milk. Titles of passages aren't like visible to players, so you don't need to worry about that not looking like a static. I'm going to put in one up here. It's actually reminding me of something that's a similar way of doing links, but it's kind of handy. Basically, you can also do a version of doing a link with 2 square brackets. And here what you might do is leave the bag in. Psych. I'm not doing that. I really needed more like I thought making a cup of tea, it's like simple, it's cohesive, it'll be very clear what I am doing at any one point. So the benefit of this is, remember I said earlier that if I made 2 passages with the same name, Twine wouldn't let me do that. And sometimes you might want to, whether it's in the same passage or in different passages, you might want to have links that look the same, that appear to be the same. You know, if you're making something where someone's going through a castle, you don't want to be limited to like go north, always taking them to the same passage, but you still want to use the same language and want that to be consistent. If you do this little, it's just a dash, like a hyphen dash and a greater than symbol, I had to figure out which one it was, to make an arrow. And what this means with this one in the middle is what the person will be able to see and be able to click is leave the bag in, exactly the same as the link above it. However, what it will do is take them to a passage, which in this case is called Psych, I'm not doing that. And it means that what the player sees on their end will be the same, but the actual impact of it and where it takes them will be different. And that can be really useful at times. Also, especially if you're on like kind of a biggish project, or if it just helps your brain in terms of how it organizes things, you might want to call the passages things that are completely different to what you want the audience to see. You know, you might have T option A, T option B, T option C, etc. But you want it to be more colourful language for the player. Use the arrow, because that will mean that what they're shown and where they're going is different. So, so we have the standard double brackets. We have double brackets with an arrow that gives us a different option. We have link. Link is something that, as you'll see over future streams, you can do a lot of other stuff with. This is I'm kind of introducing something that actually is way bigger in terms of its implications and what you do with it, because I just wanted to show the different types of links right now. There's one other way, I would say, in terms of different ways that you might want to have links operate and you might want to use links. And so it's going to look a little bit more intimidating. Again, use the things that you feel comfortable with. Come back to this stream if like at a later point you're like, okay, I've done what I want in terms of having links that just use double brackets. That's all I'm good with. And then you can come back and see how this works. But say I wanted, okay, I've got leave the bag in, add milk, add sugar. So you can see that it's changed color a little bit. I've put it inside square brackets. I mean, square brackets are like the language of Twine. So if you put something in square brackets, most likely it will slightly change its appearance. That is one of the things that I find very nice, and has, like, the more I've used Twine, the more it's become like very intuitive of how it changes the appearance of what you're doing based on the commands you're using, the codes you're using. It's also a handy way to help you see if something is broken or if it isn't working, because you might go, that's not the right color, that doesn't look how it should, that hasn't gone bold or yellow or pink or green. So that's just what it does automatically. So what I'm now going to do is do another, well, this one's a smaller than sign, and I'm just going to call this sugar, and I'm going to do, oh God, where do I get this? Sorry, that was me just staring at an unfamiliar keyboard going, where is the completely straight line? And you can see also it's gone bold, because it's called sugar. Now, that on its own won't give us a link or something that we can click on. However, kind of similar to the link above, you'll start to see a little bit of a pattern in how code works and such like. If you just do click, and then because what it says here in between the symbols is sugar, that's what it's called. That's what the name of that is. Again, I feel a little bit bad because the thing is I'm not used to calling things, I know things are called like strings and hooks and commands and things. But I'm very much, I'm not a person who like lives for the jargon. So basically, again, as with the link that we've got above saying add milk, where that is what the item is, and then you need to tell it what to do when someone clicks that or when that is used. We need to tell the game what to do if someone clicks sugar, which is shown to the player as add sugar. And similarly, we just use goto, and we go to sugar added. I think when we're further down the line with this, like, this is going to be a much more streamlined game or streamlined set of examples. So let's have a look at how that looks. What I'm going to do before that is just check one thing, because you can see that here, leave the bag in has been created, and psych, I'm not doing that, has been created, and they've got lines. But we don't have add milk, milk, milk. We don't have sugar added. When you create links or program in links with like link colon or click colon and the goto command, it won't automatically create those passages. You have to make them yourself. So I'm just going to copy so that I know that I've got it precisely right. I'm going to copy the name that's in between the quote marks. Also, I might not know the difference between like quotation marks, speech marks, etc. And so we're going to call it add milk, 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 and just so that we know we've done it. You've added milk. wow, this is such a roller coaster of a experience. You'll also see that there isn't a line between these passages. Now, I promise you, they are linked. Players will be able to go between them, or go from making the tea to add milk, milk, milk. But because it's a different type of link, because it's done with more complex code, you won't see that visual link. So depending on what works for you, I mean, I use kind of link colon and click colon bits of code quite a lot because of the other stuff you can do with it when you're a bit further down the line. But if you're starting off and you really want to be able to see exactly what links to what, you want to be able to, you know, go into your kind of big overall view and see all those connections, then you are going to want to use one of the options that has double brackets. Let's just make sure we've made sugar added. Actually, I'm going to leave that off so you can see what happens when there isn't anything to go to. So we're going to go here because obviously if we pressed play or test down here, it would start us off here, and there's no way to get to this point. So this is one of the cases where we're just going to start here, and I will bring up the internet so you can see what I'm looking at here. So we've got a few bits and pieces here. We've got our leave the bag in, which takes us to a passage. Obviously it's a new one, we've not done anything with it. We've got the other leave the bag in, takes us to, it looks the same because we haven't edited it, but takes us to a different passage. You'll also be able to see just down here that it tells you exactly what passage you're in. Now this, as it says, it's this is to do with debugging and being able to see the different bits and pieces that you're tracking. This isn't something that players are going to see when they're playing the game. Don't worry about that, but it can be useful for you to see the title of the passage and know where you are, especially when you're on something that's much more involved and such like. So add milk. You've added milk. Obviously we're using the back button right now for just examples, but if there wasn't a back button, if we'd erased that from the game, then players would just be stuck here. And then we've got this, add sugar. I can't go to the passage sugar added because it doesn't exist. So basically, and you can see that it's come up here as well, that we've got an error. If something comes up in purple, then that normally means that code has been miswritten, that there's something that you need to fix. So if we are to go back into the game and we just go, oh, okay, what was the precise sugar added? I will say something. The game is doing something a little bit interesting that I wasn't expecting it to do, which we will investigate either now or at a later date. But let's just put you've added sugar. So if we then go to making the tea again, so this is because I have to do a little switcheroo so you can see what I'm seeing. Then it's add sugar. You've added sugar because there's the passage that you can actually go to. So this gives you 4 different options of how to link between passages, and those will have different effects. I know that link and click might seem quite different, might not seem that different currently. That's because we haven't got into the finer details of what those different kind of commands, bits of code can do. But I thought it worth just showing the slight different options that you've got in terms of going between different parts of the game. Now, let's head back to Twine. There's kind of one other bit that I was thinking of going over just briefly during this first section. Basically what I'll say right now is, eagle eye folks might have noticed that here we've got add sugar, and it's in between both of these square brackets. The entirety of add sugar is in there. However, here, add sugar is only one. I'm just going to try something, because something you have to be really careful of is if you've got something that's tagged like this with this name, this has to be the same, precisely the same. And sometimes it's easy to forget that, and it's easy to like right click add sugar, when actually what the game considers this to be called is sugar click. I'm just interested as an experiment. Okay. It's not liking that as much, and I don't currently know why, but I will have a little investigate. I'll admit I'm currently on a Windows computer, and I've been mainly coding on a MacBook, but actually the recent project I've had to go between the two of them. But that is something that I will go over in my next one. This is why I did the caveat at the top of like, I'm self-taught, I can pretty much find workarounds for whatever needs doing, but I don't have some of the kind of more detailed, finer aspect stuff. So we know how to like make our way around Twine. We know how to make new passages, how to title them, how to put text into them. We know how to make connections between passages and how to do those in a couple of different ways. Which basically, like at the fundamental level, you can go make a game that people can travel around and do things. Something you might be wondering about is how to make things look a bit different, because you might not want a game that has the black background, the white text, etc. Now I'm just going to show like a tiny bit of this like what I'm about to talk about in terms of formatting text, etc. There are lots of different ways of doing this, and there's a lot of different things you can do, and just because this is like a starter stream, I'm only going to talk about like a couple of tiny things, and I'm going to put a couple of links into the chat actually that I think would be useful. So this first link is to some resources on twinery.org wiki, which is a really useful place. If you are trying to learn how to use Twine, I would thoroughly recommend it. It still involves a little bit of searching around, and to be honest, I mainly go back to it for the absolute basics. If I've forgotten the precise code to make something look underlined, for instance, I'll go to it for things like that. If I'm looking at more complex stuff or more specific stuff, like I want to know how to do one very particular thing, I will often go to other places, but it's a really good kind of repository, for want of a better word, of information, and I would thoroughly recommend it. Also, one of the things that I haven't said that is just kind of mind-blowing is that Twine is free. Twine is free. There is a Patreon for its creator. I'll see if I can get that up and put that into chat before the end of this episode, because it is kind of stunning that this has been made by one person and, as far as I'm aware, like maintained by them, and it is freely available. And to have tech that you can actually do all this stuff with and is so cool, being made freely available, and all this information about it is just wonderful. So yes, what you'll see in the link that I've just sent is one way of styling text. So let's go back to making the tea. There's kind of two different main ways to style text. You can either do it in a way that is kind of similar to what we're becoming familiar with here, where you've got something in brackets that describes what should be done, and then you've got something in square brackets that gives more information. Or sometimes there's little symbols you can use. So for instance, if I surround leave the bag in, this is now where I learn if this actually works in a Windows game. Maybe I should put this, I might put these on the outside just so that I'm not having to make a different passage. There we go. So there you can see how exactly where you put things, whether you put things on the inside of brackets or the outside of brackets, would completely screw them up. I mean, the one place you definitely would never put symbols is between two of the brackets at the edge, because what that does is tells the game that it's not a link. But as you can see, if you put a couple of like asterisks, it will have the effect in where the passage where you're editing the text, so that you can see that it's making it bold. Additionally, if you, whoops, we're just gonna, sorry, this computer that I'm on has like a very sensitive trackpad, and so it just decided to highlight a lot of stuff at once and delete it. But you can use Control Z to undo things in Twine, which has saved me so many times. As you can see here, just one asterisk will make it italic, and that does layer up. So for instance, if I put 3, then it is bold and it is italic. There's a few others of this form. I'm trying to think of the ones that I know and that I have seen. Let me just see. So if you have two kind of curvy lines, I know there's a word for that symbol, but you can do strike through if you have that on either side of some text. And if you're wondering if this is different when something isn't a link, this text is not a link. It behaves exactly the same. If you were looking at the link of add milk and you wanted to, for whatever reason, have a strike through on that, what I'd say is like probably the best use I've ever seen of strike throughs in a game is Depression Quest. If you're interested in like what different text adventure games can do, I would really recommend that as one of them. I'd recommend Quiz and Love at the End of the World, which will take 10 seconds of your time, no joke. Depression Quest is a really beautiful game. There are other ones where they've kind of blended some visuals with the text. American Election is a game that I played last year that I hugely enjoyed, and there was some kind of quite smart ways that your earlier choices came back on you later in the game. Yeah, I think those are kind of my initial go-tos of nice text adventure games that do some kind of fun things with it. But back to what I was saying. If you've got something like this, like the link add milk and then go to add milk, and you wanted for whatever reason to make that struck through, this is the first example. The game, well, the program will connect up the first set of symbols that it can. So you can see that me just putting 2 squiggles there has actually made a lot of it struck out, and suddenly this text is not a link. It's not struck out at the end because the game will automatically choose those first 2 to connect. So what I would need to do is do this, and now it's got 2 pairs and it can just connect between the 2 of those. What you wouldn't do is put anything between the 2 parts of that code, because then you risk completely messing with that code. You don't want to put anything that interrupts or gets in the way of them, because it needs to be side by side so that the game knows, like, what are you doing when you click add milk? This is what's happening. And if you put anything in the middle, it stops the game from knowing that. I know I keep saying stuff like the game interchangeably with the software and stuff, but unless I hear differently on chat that people have no idea what I'm talking about, I'm going to assume that I'm being sufficiently clear and it makes sense what I mean when I say the game won't know that. So that's one way of changing how text looks. There are different ways of doing that. Let me just see if I can bring up the other way of actually formatting text. Because I've basically sent you the link, which is for the other way. I'm going to see if I can find that in a second, because I know that there is some other kind of really comprehensive lists of basically what symbols can you put in to your Twine game that will then show you this kind of stuff, because you can do a lot of different bits and pieces, not just bold, underlined, etc. So I'm going to show you the way that's listed in that the other link, the link that I just sent. Sorry, this is me being like, I should have prepared some of these links rather than just being like, I'll find them in the middle of the thing. Here we are. Okay. I'm going to put this one in. I'm pretty sure I've got the right one. So this syntax one that I've put in chat. I mean, you can see, like, I've been using slightly different ones because sometimes slightly different ones also work. But this is also a good place to go for this kind of information. We're still in the Twine wiki, still a solid place for this kind of stuff. But you can see there's different things you can put around text for italic, bold, underline, struck through, etc. But the earlier link that I shared that says textile, we're just going to kind of, I don't know whether I'm going to really stick to this notion of like, let's just make having a cup of tea generator and use that as an example for games. I might just start going through straight up examples until we're actually in stuff where you need a game to play through to make sense of what you're doing. So with textile, again, this is going to look a little bit similar because we've got the kind of the italicized text, and you know that you've put in the right thing because it's gone italicized, which is always a tell. Textile, bold, I'd like coffee actually. Said me never. Again, we've got the colour that we would expect to come in. And basically with this kind of thing, these brackets, or parentheses, I guess, because they're curvy, these ones tell you what you want to apply to something, what you want it to look like, what you want it to do, and this tells you what is going to have that applied to it. So, for instance, if I bring that up, I'll just be able to show you how messy this now looks like. We've got the struck through on add milk, we've got the struck through on text is not a link, we've got the bold on I'd like coffee actually. So you can see that you can use slightly different ways to make text bold or not bold or italic or whatever. There's one other thing that Textile is actually quite good for, or that way of approaching things is quite good for. And that is, sorry, I'm just making sure I come back to the actual Twine window so it's visible. So you've got Textile and Bold. What you can do is change things like the font and the colour. So if I put font and I put courier in front of I'd like coffee, actually, what that would actually do is, again, I need to find like a slightly smoother way of doing this in streams. You can see that actually I'd like coffee actually now has a completely different font style. The one thing to say about this is it's good to kind of focus on only using, like, first off, kind of use Google fonts for this. The one thing you risk is that if someone's playing your game on a browser and you choose like a really atypical font, or you choose a font that like you've especially downloaded or something, if their browser doesn't host that font or doesn't recognize that font, it's going to cause problems for your game, which is why keeping it to kind of more widely known, widely hosted, etc. fonts is going to just be best and mean that there isn't as much stress or hassle later down the line. And the one other thing I think before we kind of wind up for today is as well as the font that your text can be, you can also use that kind of code to change the color. So if you have text and then color, I'm now kind of normalized to spelling color in an American way when using Twine. If anyone's wondering about me doing that. This is going to be an interesting experiment, because the thing is, either you have to go for like quite a generic color. If you want a really specific one, then you'll need to find out the color's name. That's if you're doing it in Passage with this particular approach. If you're going to change like the entire color of all the text in the game, you would be doing that in the style sheet, which was mentioned briefly earlier. And there you can actually put just the like hexadecimal name of the color. But there are ways, if you like do Google searches, then you can find out like the computer language name. For instance, the name of the link color, that blue link that we've seen when we've viewed it on the web browser, is royal blue. And you have to put royal blue, all one word, capital R, capital B, to get that color. So let's see if it recognizes the simple word green. Let's just see if it recognizes green. Okay, it recognizes green, but this may well not be the green that you actually want in your game. Definitely not on a black background. We will get into how to change background colors maybe next session, because that's a bit more of a style sheet thing. However, that shows you a little bit on how to change a text color, how to change its formatting, like whether it's struck through, whether it's bold, etc. There's a few other things that we will get into in terms of how you can mess with the text and make things look a little bit different. But for now, we're probably going to leave it there. So for anyone who's joined kind of relatively late, this is going to go onto YouTube. We've gone over looking at the general like interface for Twine and what you want to look at, looked into making passages. We've looked at linking between passages and different ways of writing up links, and a little bit on like why you might want some of those different ways. And then also a little bit on formatting text, so that if you want things to have different colors or if you want things to look a bit different, you can change that. That's where I'm going to leave it for today. I can only really like just talk like this for about an hour. But this is a fortnightly stream. So there is something on this channel at 11 a.m. every Saturday. half the time it is made up songs about made up people, which is where people tell me about their TTRPG characters or games and stories from them, and I make up songs with my ukulele off the top of my head about them. And every other week is this text adventure time. And so next time, I'm not sure what we're going to be looking at. I think we're going to start like jumping into quite a lot of stuff. Probably looking at tracking variables, which is stuff like if you're in a game and have you thrown a rock? Have you said yes to the fortune teller? Have you managed to unlock, the escape pod from the ship or not? And looking at how we can track that in game to make it feel more responsive and to acknowledge players' choices. And I think looking at variables and the different ways you track those and the different ways that you can change those and some of the things to avoid in terms of like not making your life harder than it needs to be and easy troubleshooting will probably take up a decent session. But this will be on YouTube, so you can look back if there's anything you want to check, or if you miss any future sessions, they'll all be on there. And I would say, like, if you're curious about how some of this stuff can work and look, there's the games that I've already recommended, Anna Anthropy's Quiz and Love at the End of the World, Depression Quest, which I want to say is by Zoe Quinn, but I don't know if I'm remembering the right name. There's American Election. Really sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head who's made that game, but it's really, really cool. And, as a self-indulgent plug, if you look at parabolictheatre.com, there is a current game/show called The House of Chenchi that I've been working on as a coder. And basically it's a text adventure game, except part of the clickable links are Zoom links. So you're going through a house, but you also have Zoom links where you can talk to the people who are in that house, in kind of a very cool use of both of those bits of software. Thanks B Scott, sorry, I just saw your comment. I'm really glad this is like useful and good for people, because it's weird, like on the one hand I feel very confident about a lot of stuff because I've been doing so much in Twine for the last 3 months, but on the other hand, like explaining it to other people, whilst also with the caveat of like I'm self-taught, that's why I'm not using a lot of the language, is like a weird balance. But I'm glad, and like if this helps people make stuff with Twine, because ultimately it is like simple and straightforward. It's just sometimes having all the information in one place and not having to like scour the internet for bits and pieces. But yeah, future streams will involve how to embed visuals, how to bring audio into your games, how to do more sweeping kind of changes to how it looks, how to do text entries. So like, the player can tell you their name and then you use that in different ways. How to do timed text and using timers in games. So there's loads of stuff that we can get into, but we'll leave it there for today. Do like follow the channel. There's other bits and pieces on this channel, but I'm kind of slowly building up because real life work is a lot at the moment. But yeah, I think that's kind of everything there is to currently say about that. So thanks for tuning in, and hopefully see you at a future stream. Bye.